The best of Money Matters. Money Matters with Hong Bin Zhong and Chua Tian Tian.
That's right, you've been tuning in to Money Matters with Hong Bin Zhong and Chua Tian Tian as we bring the latest budget conversation to you. Now, we've discussed the new announcements surrounding SG60 as well as the measures announced to address concerns surrounding rising costs of living. And in our next segment, we'll dive into support for workers throughout life and equipping them with the right skills in the ever-changing world. Now, joining us in the studio is Terence Ho, Associate Professor in Practice, Singapore University of Social Sciences, and Nicholas Fang, Director of Security and Global Affairs at Singapore Institute of International Affairs and the Managing Director of Strategic Consultancy, Black Dot. Now, back to the conversation on supporting workers throughout various life stages. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said rapid technological advances, particularly in the area of AI, will transform workplaces and jobs. And that also means that workers need to be equipped with new skills to remain competitive and relevant. Now, let's have a listen to what PM Wong said during his budget speech.
Just a few years ago, tools like ChatGPT didn't even exist. Now there's a rapidly expanding ecosystem of AI models. They can generate high-quality text, images, and videos. They can write better programming code than many experts, assist in complex problem-solving, and even help to accelerate research breakthroughs. AI will get better in the future, and other new disruptive technologies will emerge. It is hard to predict how they will impact specific industries and jobs. But one thing is clear. Our workers must be equipped with the skills to stay competitive and relevant. That's why we are investing heavily in lifelong learning and have made significant moves to strengthen SkillsFuture as a key pillar of our social compact.
As you've heard there from Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, SkillsFuture, that remains a cornerstone in our social compact. And if you recall, during Budget 2024 last year, PM Wong introduced the SkillsFuture Level Up program to better support mid-career Singaporeans in getting a significant skills reboot. Now, under the program, all Singaporeans aged 40 and above will get $4,000 in SkillsFuture credit. And starting next month, individuals can also apply for a training allowance of up to $3,000 for selected full-time courses, and they'll also have 24 months worth of allowances, which is up to $72,000 per worker. What is new this time round, though, is how the training allowance will be extended to part-time training, and we're looking at $300 of allowance per month. Now, to start us off, Terence and also Nicholas, question for you both. Any initial thoughts on the extension of training allowance for part-time study? How practical is that measure?
I think first and foremost, if we take a macro view, this focus on upskilling and retraining the Singapore workforce is critical. We talk a lot, or rather we heard quite a few measures targeting the corporates in Singapore and also encouraging more MNEs to come to Singapore and keeping Singapore competitive as a global sort of business hub. I think one of the key things that most people will look out when they're deciding where to site businesses is also the availability of skilled workforce that is not just skilled for the current requirements, but ready for future requirements as well. So the $4,000 SkillsFuture credit in the last budget was really one of the more eye-catching headline figures. I think a lot of people are still quite stunned at how much that is. So it really again shows the government putting the money where their mouth is and saying we will support this. The fact that they have now extended this to those seeking to upskill while on working part-time, I think is a very progressive move. I think it's a recognition that a lot of people these days, young people and maybe those approaching their middle of their careers, are keen to have some more flexibility in terms of not just what they upskill at or in, but also how they go about doing it, and to have the flexibility to tap on these allowances while working part-time. I think it's a very progressive move and potentially would extend the benefits to an even greater pool of people who are thinking about upskilling.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we recognize that there are learners with many different circumstances, differing time commitments. For some, I think the Level Up program, which provides support for the full-time long-form training, which was announced last year, that's very helpful with the training allowance especially. But at the same time, there's another significant group of people who still are unable to take that kind of time off. And so extending the training allowance to them as well would be a very positive signal. I think it recognizes that there are many different different circumstances, and basically we have to address mindsets beyond just funding as well. That's also going to be important to get the sort of mindset of maintaining one's career health and investing early rather than waiting till one is displaced from a job in training.
Do you think, though, just a quick question for you both, $300 a month is enough to move the needle and to get more people to come on board to upskill and reskill in a formal setting on a part-time basis, though?
I mean, it's meant to defray learning expenses, not to fully fund or cover.
Yeah.
So I think this is, again, always in line with the Singapore government's view that it should be a collaborative effort. It shouldn't be people turning completely to the government for a handout, but it's to show support and to signal to workers that this is the direction they should be seeking to move in, to become future ready to address the challenges in the future as well.
So I think the $300 is, as what Nicholas mentioned, meant to defray costs. For some, it could be added sort of impetus or incentive, but it may not completely move the needle for others, where there are other barriers, which is why I think the training in terms of delivery must be high quality, must be relevant, so that people feel that it does make a difference. It must be delivered in different ways to suit their convenience in terms of whether they can only make it online, in person, or maybe in the weekends or in the evenings and so on. I think all of that together would help persuade more to take up training.
And Terence, if I may just stay with you, we're seeing a further boost provided to lower wage workers with an enhanced tier of support under the Workforce Skills Support. Any quick thoughts given how more details are only coming at the Committee of Supply or the cost debate?
Yeah, so this is really, extending the kind of higher tier support for the long-form learning under the Level Up program, but for a younger age group, because the lower wage workers recognize that they may need further, support for such long-form learning. So even those below 40 years old, between 30 and 40 in this case, would now benefit from this. So I think it's a good move. It sort of marries the sort of support given for the long-form learning and now brings it down to a lower age group for the lower wage workers.
And it's really sort of casting the net broader, right, to say that everybody should consider this and everybody could potentially benefit from this kind of upskilling. So again, making sure that the narrative is not just continued but shared with as broad a demographic as possible.
And I do want to talk more about support for institutes of higher learning and autonomous universities, particularly if I could go with you, Terence, for this one. Talk about a new city campus, SUSS. How practical is the measure again in getting Singaporeans of all ages and in all stages of life to really upskill and to reskill and to adopt that lifelong learning attitude?
Does that mean you get a new office as well? New spanking office in the city?
My office is separate from the main campus, but this is a very exciting development, certainly as member of the SUSS community. And I think that really the focus of now that we have these 6 autonomous universities, they can focus on different areas, and certainly the SUSS has a key role in lifelong learning. I think what would be key would be the increased accessibility in terms of a city campus and also the visibility, the image. So it'll be top of mind when people of all ages think about, furthering their studies or reskilling.
And in fact, I came from SMU, so being part of a city campus that has its allure. In the interest of time, Nicholas and Terence, I'm consolidating the measures on supporting our enterprises in workforce transformation over here. We've got the introduction of a new SkillsFuture workforce development grant. That's a redesigned SkillsFuture enterprise credit to make it more accessible to companies. And firms with at least 3 resident employees, they'll also get a fresh $10,000 and the redesigned SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit. A lot of things going on and also measures to support senior workers as well, with the Senior Employment Credit extended by 1 year to end 2026. We're also looking at CPF contributions rate for those above age 55 to 65 being increased by 1.5 percentage points in 2026. Again, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on, the long list of measures. But what aspect of the measures really stood out to you this time round as we compare that with prior year's budget?
I think the support this year for the employer side of the training and job redesign is quite substantial. 3 major sort of initiatives coming together. Not all of them are new, but they've been also packaged and redesigned to be more user-friendly, if you like. Definitely the case for the SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit. And I think that there's also recognition that there's a lot of good work going on with the NTUC's CTC initiative and therefore putting more money down here. So I think it's a comprehensive, substantial set of measures for that. And the measures also for senior employment are going to be critical because the population of senior workers in our workforce is growing. So these are also quite welcome.
I would try to flip it around as well, beyond just thinking about the benefits for the local workforce. I think I'm hoping that multinationals around the world look at this and also get a very clear signal that the government is doing all it can to really make a future-ready workforce, cutting across all age groups and demographics. We talked about the support for the younger age groups as a new addition this year, but also all the different things to support older workers as we face a aging population as a whole. So I think, again, when we look at a very competitive international marketplace with a lot of different countries all looking to eat our lunch, at any opportunity that they get. The fact that we are investing this much, that we are rolling out, as you say, Tian Tian, this sort of massive list of different type of measures, taken holistically, it is again the government sending a very strong signal that Singapore workforce is going to be upskilled, is going to be a right size and right skilled for the challenges of the future. And for any international company or even local companies seeking to grow and develop, we hopefully will have the workforce needed for this now and in the years ahead as well. So I think that's one perspective that we should remind ourselves as well.
Now, if you're just tuning in, we're in conversation with Terence Ho, Associate Professor in Practice at Singapore University of Social Sciences, and Nicholas Fang, Director of Security and Global Affairs, Singapore Institute of International Affairs, and Managing Director of Strategic Consultancy, Black Dot. Now, Nicholas, you mentioned a lot about attracting businesses, the signaling effect over there, and that brings us to the next segment of our conversation, which looks at support to businesses, measures for businesses, and generally, if we look at them, they fall within three areas. The first one being tech and innovation, the second being the enterprise ecosystem, and the third being infrastructure investments amid resource constraints. Now, to this end, PM Wong actually said that while Singapore does not operate at the same scale as the US when it comes down to the tech sector, this country has a generation of local tech firms like Grab, like Sea, like Razer, and Singapore is also home to the world's top tech companies. It is a key player in semiconductors, and PM Wong said Singapore can also fire on our technology and innovation engines through attracting quality investments. We'll talk a bit more about that, but first have a listen to what PM Wong had to say.
To enhance our technology and innovation engines, we have to anchor more high-quality investments. There have been attempts internationally through BEPS 2.0 to ensure that multinational enterprises or MNEs pay a minimum level of taxes worldwide, or to tilt the playing field in favor of governments. But in reality, MNEs wield considerable leverage and options. And that is why governments everywhere are still spending significant amounts to attract investments. We cannot afford to outbid the major economies, but we do need to set aside sufficient resources to maximize our competitive strengths. So I will top up the National Productivity Fund by $3 billion. Our R&D efforts are critical in powering our innovation and technology engines. The government has consistently invested about 1% of GDP annually in R&D over the last 20 years. These investments have borne fruit. For example, our biotech ecosystem will not be where it is today without Biopolis, which we built more than 20 years ago. It also served as a platform for biotech talent to gather and share knowledge that then diffused into our education system, which uplifted a new generation of Singaporeans.
And Terence and Nicholas, we've heard there from PM Wong. And if I may go to Terence first, let's talk about some of the measures under technology and innovation. At the heart of it is a refresh to Singapore's public biosciences, medtech research infrastructure, a new semiconductor R&D fabrication facility as well. What is the first thing that stood out to you over here, and are the new investments to your expectations?
Yeah, so I think it's quite clear that the area of bioscience and medtech along with semiconductors, which is really the foundation for a lot of the computing and AI that we are expecting in the years ahead. These are going to be key for not just Singapore, but any country that wants to be at the forefront of technology. And clearly, these are very expensive, big-ticket infrastructure, and hence setting aside the funds for them is really investing in our future, on which a lot of our economy will depend. So I'm quite heartened that there's really identification of specific areas that we are investing in and money being set aside for that.
And even as we talk about investments in future trends, we also want to look at attracting companies to Singapore. And, earlier we were just chatting off air, Nicholas, we talked about the corporate tax rebate. PM Wong did say he will introduce a 50% corporate income tax rebate in the year of assessment 2025. How far will that sweeten the deal?
I think so. I mean, as a business owner myself, I think anything that can help companies, and there was some concern in the build-up to this year's budget that because it's a SG60 year and because we've spoken so much about cost of living challenges, that there'll be so much emphasis on support for individuals and households, that companies will be left out. So it is heartening to see that there isn't a complete ignoring of companies. In fact, there are a range of different measures, as we were just talking about, that have to be contextualized in the overall benefits it would have for the economy as a whole. But I think one thing that I do agree with Terence that, it's heartening to see certain areas, specific sectors identified as potential. And I'm glad that we move beyond the usual talking just about AI and data and stuff like that we go into looking at things like medtech and life sciences. But, when we talk about local tech companies, the examples that PM Wong mentioned, Grab, Sea and Razer, to me, we hopefully will start to see more champions that we can talk about. I think these companies are doing good stuff, but, we've been talking about them for a few years now. So I think we really do need to move to be a bit more aggressive in terms of attracting and building these kind of local champions in new areas that really put us at the forefront when it comes to global R&D. And that's potentially how we can attract more MNEs to come to Singapore to base their operations here.
Which brings us to the next point on strengthening the enterprise ecosystem. I mean, we're seeing more measures in store for M&As, internationalization. There's a global founder program later this year, and there's also a new enterprise compute initiative and a new private credit growth fund. It does appear to be quite wide-ranging and comprehensive, but really, if I could go with you again, Nicholas, and thereafter Terence, what are your thoughts?
I think this is, again, one of those situations where we have got quite a long laundry list of different measures as well. So potentially we need a bit of time to digest and figure out how they're all going to work and gel together to enhance Singapore's competitiveness. But, for me, it's just heartening to see that when it comes to the signals sent in the budget by PM Wong, there is this massive, sort of doubling down on R&D budgets and on ensuring that the Singapore capabilities remain on the cutting edge of what might be required globally.
Okay.
So for me, I think it's really the ecosystem is the key word for me. So besides, of course, the large foreign companies, the large local companies, really what measures are there to help the SMEs? And indeed, things like the Enterprise Compute Initiative is, to me, a very good one because it's about translating technology to business solutions that SMEs can tap on more readily, or making it more accessible to them.
And as the company sort of grows over time, it will be looking at exit options for investors. And that brings us to the part on the attractiveness of the local equities market. We are seeing some feedback on the ground as well. And to this, PM Wong said he has accepted the Equities Market Review Group's recommendations to strengthen the attractiveness of our stock market. Among them, recommendations on tax incentives for Singapore-based companies and fund managers that choose to list here and grow their economic activities here. Two parts to this question, if I could start with you, Nicholas. What is missing with what is the missing piece in the attractiveness of making SGX attractive once again? And do you think the review is enough to, or recommendations from the review is sufficient to rejuvenate the local boss?
Again, that is another $1 billion kind of question, and similar to you, we hear quite a lot of feedback on the ground, sort of griping about the Singapore exchange and its attractiveness or lack thereof. I think, as PM Wong has sort of mentioned, the review group, the Equities Market Review Group, which is chaired by Minister Chee Hong Tat, will share more details on the measures in the coming days. So I look forward to seeing that as well. But I hope, keeping my fingers crossed, I'm not sure how optimistic I am, but that the recommendations and the measures announced by PM Wong, including the tax incentives and for fund managers to invest substantially in Singapore-listed equities, I hope that it will move the needle, but I really can't say for sure now that it'll be enough. Yeah.
Any thoughts, Terence?
Yeah, so this is really quite a challenging issue because I think, as has been mentioned before, that the sort of global listings are really concentrated around a few global bulls. And really, I think the measures are still early days. We have to wait and see the details. I think the key is also to adjust along the way. Test out something, see what works, whether companies are responding, and then think out of the box and maybe adjust the measures along the way.
And another bulk of the conversation in PM Lawrence Wong's speech had to do with infrastructure investments. So as we move on to that, let's have a listen to what PM Wong said in his budget speech.
Our air hub is another key pillar of connectivity. We will break ground for Changi Airport Terminal 5 in the coming months. When completed, Terminal 5 will expand our airport's capacity by more than 50% and will ensure that Singapore remains a critical gateway for global travel and trade. To ensure sufficient resources to develop our air hub, I will top up the Changi Airport Development Fund by $5 billion. With the President's concurrence, the government will also provide a guarantee through Changi Airport Group. This will help to lower the costs of borrowings needed to develop Terminal 5 and supporting infrastructure in Changi East.
Any quick thoughts right there on infrastructure on Terminal 5 before we move on to talk about clean energy investments, Terence or Nicholas?
It's always key to build ahead of demand in a sense, and certainly the air connectivity, sea connectivity is part of the overall connectivity that Singapore needs to be plugged into the world economy. And so I think setting aside this funding is going to be quite critical for our future.
And I think we should look again beyond the hardware. I think the infrastructure, the capacity, the space that's being set aside is significant. But a lot of feedback that we are hearing ground is that, a lot of the software, the sort of systems and processes we have that really enhance the smoothness and ease of clearance of customs, for example, that many countries around the world have installed this kind of facial recognition, biometric type capabilities. But almost without fail, people would say, but in Singapore, it actually works. There are a lot of other countries that have the stuff, and consistently when you try to use it, they're like, please go to the manual counters. So I think that part is something that Singapore does very well to ensure that we are ahead as well of the curve. And by having, more space and to ensure greater connectivity as well as safety, when you look at the challenges facing other airports, even in developed countries, Singapore is doing very well. And I think this continued investment will ensure that we stay as far as possible ahead of the pack.
And a quick one, if I can stay with you as well, Nicholas. Besides on the infrastructure investments in Changi Airport, I think one of the key points or the key notable topics from PM Wong's speech talks on the possibility of nuclear power, which was considered back in 2010. Now, back then in 2010, it was determined that conventional nuclear technologies were not suitable for Singapore. So as we expand our access to clean energy, any thoughts on the possibility of using nuclear this time around, especially in the age of generative AI?
This conversation has been going on, as PM Wong and you just highlighted as well, since 2010. And from my time as a nominated MP in Parliament, we raised this for discussion between 2012 and 2014 as well. And consistently, the position was that there's a proactive study that's going on. And PM Wong said again that we will proactively study, once again, the potential deployment of nuclear power in Singapore. But it does sound like there are some potentially more concrete steps given the agreements with the US on civil nuclear cooperation and also similar cooperation with other countries that have experience in civilian nuclear power, especially with small modular reactors. So again, not something terribly new. I remember talking about this more than a decade ago. But as the pressure builds on having more green energy and sustainable sources of energy, I think this will continue to be part of the conversation. The key thing, again, as always, is always the safety discussion. And stuff that we have to bear in mind is not just how to safeguard the operations of the reactors or whatever form that we have them, but potentially how do you dispose of waste, nuclear waste itself, which can potentially be dangerous too. So still quite a complicated conversation.
Any quick remarks?
If I may add on, I think with new technology comes new possibilities, and I think the technology is still evolving.
Yeah.
And the fact that PM Wong devoted such a long segment in his speech to this suggests that it is really a serious possibility. I think Singapore has already been building up the capabilities early in nuclear, and I think part of all this is also preparing Singaporeans for the possibility, because as you can imagine, there may be some concerns among some segments when we really want to proceed with nuclear technology, and hence preparing the ground early, kind of sensitizing people to this possibility. I think that is very important.
Thanks a lot for the insights, Terence and Nicholas. Coming up next after the news is our post-budget 2025 commentary on measures to build a sustainable and resilient city. Now, that was Terence Ho, Associate Professor in Practice, Singapore University of Social Sciences, and Nicholas Fung, Director of Security and Global Affairs at Singapore Institute of International Affairs and Managing Director of Strategic Consultancy, Black Dot.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.